Nick's a little braver than I with the live demo stuff, especially when you hear that. All right, I got an hour. No, you got 20 minutes. Oh, I don't know about that. And nobody wants to go late and keep people from the beer. So really, I have, basically this is kind of some suggestions, some thoughts, some topics. I do basically federal sales for Rapid7. I live up in Reston, and I meet with all these agencies, and I do some commercial work as well, and I've been out here for a couple of years. And one of the things that I tend to find is I do so many of these demonstrations, and I talk to these environments, both federal and commercial, and they talk about how they use vulnerability management and how they use pen testing, and I have red teams and I have IT security guys who do everything by themselves. And one of the real things that we've recognized as a company over the last couple of years is there's a ton of really great pen testing functionality that a straight IT security guy could take advantage of. Things that you don't need a CEH or a CISP for, that you don't need 5 years experience. And it's something where pen testing itself is a really necessary practice. It can be extremely effective. You should have third-party people doing it once a year. As a pen testing company, we have other companies that are not us come in and do our pen test. And that's all really great, but it doesn't have to be a pen tester doing some of the actions that they often do to take advantage of some really useful information to basically easily and quickly affect your overall security without investing in a $10,000 external pen test or hiring somebody for hopefully 100,000 plus a year to sit there all day and hack on your environment. And that's something where, again, pen testing can often be stealthy, can often be invasive, can have an impact, and there's a lot of non-impact aspects of pen testing that you can do instead of a quarterly on a weekly, maybe even daily basis. And so basically I just have a couple of ideas that, again, these are things where when I mentioned them in demonstrations, and we have these two tools as a company, a web scanner, database scanner, OS scanner, all in one as a vulnerability management tool, and we have a pen testing tool. And often, again, someone will come in and say, hey, I'm really interested in pen testing, and by 45 minutes later, they're only talking about the vulnerability scanner, because that's not what they really wanted, but they heard Metasploit was really cool, and they called us up and said, yeah, I want some of that. So, again, it's often one of those things where they're starting to overlap, and as a company, we're really pushing making pen testing part of more of a weekly, monthly process, and some of the aspects of it can come out. So if we look at, for example, things like vulnerability validation. So we have a services company, someone will hire us to come out for a week. We'll sit down there and we'll do searching on Google, on LinkedIn, they'll do some enumeration, they'll start doing some light probing, they'll find a firewall and a weakness and power through it. And often there's this, well, what is their phase before they start attacking? The vulnerability scanners, so obviously Nessus is really well known, it's been around for a long time. There's about a dozen different vulnerability scanners out there. So we have ours. One of the problems is if you have enough assets, you never get down to zero vulnerabilities. There's reasons not to. You have acceptable use, acceptable risk. You have thousands and thousands of them. You have small patch windows. You have patches that are worse than the current version. There's all these reasons to never get down to zero. So one of the key things we look at from a pen testing perspective is, I have a vulnerability scanner that gave me, let's say, 2,000 vulnerabilities, and then it just kind of left me there. I don't know what to do first. I don't know where the false positives are. I don't know where compensating controls are. As good as a lot of the vulnerability scanners are, even ours, it's not smart enough to see a vulnerability and say, hey, where's the antivirus or where's the IPS? And let me go talk to that real quick and say, hey, you got this covered? Yes or no? You do? All right, great. Then I'm going to call as a false positive of my own. They're just not that interactive with those security tools. They're moving that way, and I've noticed that us and other tools do a really good job of not siloing data, so a SIM could potentially make that type of correlation, but within a vulnerability scanner, that's not going to happen. Pen testing, whether it's Metasploit, aspects of Backtrack, NIC2, that's the interactive part. That's the thing where I can tell you this is not a part of your environment because the patch was fully applied, but there's some error in the registry that says it wasn't. And the DLL itself, it's fine. Again, maybe a vulnerability scanner gets confused by that. There's so many reasons for having false positive, even ours, and we really push accuracy is not zero, and no company has 0%. So what you can leverage from, again, a pen testing perspective is, let's go probe these, and again, it doesn't have to be launching hundreds and hundreds of modules, the way that even the open source version of Metasploit is, you can do categories, you can do just the safe ones, you can take into account, these are the vulnerabilities that are there, these are the vulnerabilities I know have exploits to them, and only attack those exploits. So the database on Metasploit's up to 800 plus these days. You don't have to launch kind of an auto-pwn, do everything to be able to get some value out of attacking specific vulnerabilities. And often when we look at, well, now I weeded them down using some pen testing, and I found some top vulnerabilities, some high-risk ones, some exploitable ones. What do I do then? The paralysis of, I have so many vulnerabilities, and how do I rank them? Meaning, here's 100 different exploitable ones. CVSS is a really good score, but again, it doesn't take into account anything like exploitability, like the active interaction. And there's all this criteria that Metasploit can go ahead and grab the data that's on there and show you this is an important foothold into the environment because it can lead to X, Y, Z. And again, you don't have to do a multi-pivot island hopping VPN tunnel coming back and it takes you 8 hours to see really quickly what users and accounts are on here. What can I get from just a really quick information gather, some of the auto information gather that's included in a tool like Metasploit. And it's something where you can do this spray and pray of, a lot of pen testers stay away from like script kiddie stuff or auto-pwn because it's very noisy and it's not the most effective way, and they should. Again, if you're gonna invest 10 grand in external assessment, they should be very manual, very targeted, very specific. But there are script kiddies out there, and there are people who do just hammer on your external IPs for 20 minutes. If they see low-hanging fruit, they'll pay more attention. If they don't, they'll move on. And that's, again, the type of functionality in a lot of tools now where it's worth a little bit of time of, on an off hour, on a weekend, do an auto-pwn, launch the 200 most well-crafted and most common exploits in something like Metasploit, and see what you end up with. If you end up with nothing, then good. You're doing some due diligence, you got some patches out there. What I've seen from a fair amount of my demonstrations is even leveraging some of the auto-pwn capability in Metasploit is they get 1 or 2 dozen from entire DMZ, and they're pretty surprised because they say, well, what's this and what's that? And they hadn't just thought to try that type of auto-pwn stuff because of fears of impacting the environment. And that's something, again, from a pen testing standpoint, we're putting a lot more information there as what could be the consequence. Can you run this on a production machine? Could this cause instability? If it caused instability, how would you remediate that type of stuff? So we're really trying to make, again, pen testing also safer to do 1 o'clock in the middle of the day. Now, as you start to have these results, again, not having proprietary information is really critical. There's about 6 different ways to remotely interact with a tool like Metasploit today, and not just from an API perspective. If you're comfortable with Ruby, there's resource files, there's interpreter scripts, there's the actual files themselves are all fairly open. And so it's really key to then, again, if you've already invested in a vulnerability management tool, you should be able to have Metasploit type of information reach into that and automatically make some exceptions. So if you're going to have Metasploit do the work of validating them, what we've started to do from an integration between tools, and again, not just between our tools, but multiple vulnerability scanners, is have this ability to update the vulnerability information. So again, you're not manually going there and clicking false positive, compensating control, but you can have that type of stuff automatically batch exported from a Metasploit and inform your vulnerability tool. So now you basically weeded that out. So I generate a report. I don't want these kind of compensating controls or false positive in there. I really just want the good stuff, the exploitable stuff, the high priority stuff. So you don't have this report of 1,000 vulnerabilities, but through these type of processes and going in from a vulnerability scanner to a pen testing tool back to a vulnerability scanner, you weeded it down to maybe 50 or 60 vulnerabilities. You get rid of those, and then you kind of wash, rinse, repeat. And that's something where basically just recently we've made the ability to take some of the evidence you can gather in Metasploit, like an NTLM hash, and put that into the vulnerability scanner. So now what you can see is, again, someone just does a Nessa scan of my environment, they find some vulnerabilities, they probe me a little bit, just get that foot in the door. We know most exploits from a data breach standpoint isn't the first machine, it's probably the second or the third, but it all kind of starts somewhere, and it usually starts with one vulnerability, one weakness, and then it's kind of those dominoes roll down. So what we've been able to do is, if that one machine gets exploited and we get a shell and we're able to grab an admin and was on here at some point in the last couple of months, we don't have his username and password, we're not doing brute forcing, we're not doing John the Ripper, we just grabbed his hash right out of there. It's in clear text because people aren't afraid of hashes because you look at it and I can't type that into a username and password. And what we've enabled, which has always been a very effective technique within Metasploit, is to take that type of information and throw it into a credential scan and a vulnerability scanner. So now the vulnerability scanner itself, which was doing black box, just what do I see, Joe Person on the internet, can go ahead and do a credentialed scan and leverage the credentials just like, again, a real hacker would, in extremely like 5-click, 8-command line type of functionality that, again, I don't need to really even understand what the hash is. I don't need to break it. I just need to copy and paste it, put it in as I would do a user and password in the past, and you see this great vulnerability scan that now shows all the software on that asset, shows all the internal registry hive, shows the DLL versions and System32 files. There's a huge difference between an internal credentialed scan of a machine and that black box external, which is a lot of guessing, a lot of open ports, and maybe some services are running. Maybe your fingerprint's accurate, but not fully accurate. And again, the difference you'd see between the vulnerability data before and after can show you, if this is what I'm seeing with, again, a really quick, easy test, this is exactly what an external person is seeing and what they're trying to get. Because once they fully own that internal machine, that's when problems start happening, that's where they start dropping malware, that's where they start pivoting through firewalls, and that's exactly really what we're trying to highlight. So it's something where, again, from a copy and paste standpoint, you can see I basically grabbed some information with Metasploit. Again, this is auto-gathers type stuff. This is not me searching for it, this is no special commands, this is not a post-exploitation module. This is me getting a user-level shell with no root permissions and just quickly grabbing the hashes that are on here. And then, from a inside of Metasploit perspective, leveraging the ability from an API to control a scanner like Nexpose, put the credentials in instead of a username and password, and then start a new credential scan. So, perimeter security, firewalls and IPSs are still the bread and butter. Every place has one, and it's something where focus over the last couple of years has always been on the perimeter. And I still run into a lot of companies that say, I have the greatest firewall in the world, I have some Fortinet or maybe some Palo Alto, and I have redundant ones, and I have IPS, and now I have DLP and DPI, and so we're all focused about the perimeter. That's where my budget goes to, and it's something where, again, a pen tester can come in, and I've seen HD do this with Hacking for Charities a couple of weeks ago. For a $10 DNS name and a case of beer, completely bypassed all external security, owned every single machine, was spoofing emails to the IT people, intercepting emails from help people, users needed help inside, something weird with my machine, completely owned it for basically in 24-hour period with a $10 swipe with a credit card and a case of beer. And it's something where social engineering is, again, it's considered part of pen testing. You're testing people as a vector, and it's something where, if you're familiar with Backtrack and SET, there's some really great abilities to do phishing attacks, web spoofing, malicious USB physical file type stuff that a lot of companies aren't taking advantage of yet. And that's because either they feel like, well, if I get into social engineering, I'm really getting the whole pen testing and we just outsource that stuff. Or we have a manager who says, I don't want you to be a big brother. Funny enough, even federal agencies, they get pushed back because they don't want people to be afraid of the emails they get, or they're afraid of being on some list somewhere, or the management just doesn't want them probing into that kind of an actual person attacking them internally, and there's that kind of uncertainty. So what I've seen a lot of traction on over the last about a year is you can take this question of how many of my people are phishable or socially engineered. And fortunately, RSA did a lot for this topic last year, and having a ridiculously easy, if you haven't seen it, you have to look up a ridiculously easy Excel attachment that said, it's time to recruit, can you please look at this document and open it. It was literally like 2 lines, and it went to 2 or 3 people, so very targeted social engineering attack, and it's led to other companies being breached, integrators, and that's great for getting internal buy-in. There's no company I talk to that says, I am completely confident my people are not social engineerable. Most of them think it's a lot of them. Like that, for the companies that are here, if you're here, it's probably not 100%, because hopefully you at least aren't. social engineerable, but I can tell you that nobody ever has a number. Nobody has like, it's probably half, it's a quarter, it's 8%. They know, again, it's more than 1 and it's less than 100, and often what I see is with a little bit of testing, and again, fairly safe testing, doesn't have to be attributable. You don't even need shells. You don't need to have Metasploit auto-poning their browser because you convince them to click on a link in email and they go to the website and they're on the website and then you're attacking their Internet Explorer. You can do that, but it's not necessary to basically get to that number of just how bad are we, because if you do, again, if you say a 500-person company, you send one email out to 500 people, you get an 8% response rate, you're doing much better than your average company out there. And it's something where you realize, well, maybe we should send a little email reminder once a quarter, give out some examples. It's something that people should be aware of, but we don't need to stop the presses. We don't need to make everybody go to a 5-hour security awareness training. Whereas if you find that number is up in the 50, 60, 70%, then you realize, I spent a little bit of time to make something like LinkedIn spoofable. And the LinkedIn email that comes out is extremely static. It's very simple. It's click here. We got a lot of it about a year and a half ago at Rapid7 because we have so many salespeople where they realized we're all over LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn constantly. We were a really ripe target. And I was seeing spoofs every day, and I've only been with the company like a couple of weeks. Things like LinkedIn can be very easily simulated. It's something where people don't really think of it as an attack vector yet. There's social media stuff there. The contacts list are there. And it's something where most people are just used to, oh yeah, connect, good. And if you're in this kind of business space, and again, you're in Virginia, especially Richmond, a lot of LinkedIn activity, it's something where, again, myself, you see this is dated literally 7 days ago. This is somebody who I have pretty much only connected with on LinkedIn. I've met him in person like 4 or 5 years ago. We exchanged cards. And I got this email saying, check order number, random digits, PDF attachment. And again, of course, I immediately look at this and say, there's no reason this guy has a check for me. I like him. He tried to hire me a couple times, but I'm pretty sure he's not just sending me checks. So I replied to him saying, hey, did your Gmail get hacked? Are you trying to exploit me? And he pretty quickly replies saying, I didn't. It's a great idea, but no, I'm not really in the business right now. Hope all is well. I've seen a lot of Gmail spoofing lately. It's even my fiance got one from me yesterday saying it's from me at Gmail, and hey, can you go ahead and click on this link, and hey, keep in touch. And so again, obviously she immediately recognized, why would my fiance saying keep in touch unless you know something I don't. But again, it's extremely common, and HD will talk about how with Windows 7 it's much harder to get a shell. It's much harder to brute force it, to auto-pwn it. You look at XP versus Windows 7, night and day, which is a good thing. And again, his thoughts are social engineering is already ripe fruit. It's just going to become riper. If the workstation's a harder target, I just need to convince somebody to let me in. And again, Nick gives a great example of that. And it's something where people, as a vector, you can test it, and once you have that kind of feeling of we're pretty susceptible, you can go to a deeper phase of, now that I've tested, how's my endpoint security hold up? Does my HIPS prevent the exploitation? My email security preventing the link from being clicked? Does my browser security prevent the malicious executable from coming down, or the R spoofing, or whatever you want to let Metasploit then do? And there's a whole trail you can go down to find out, well, just how bad are we, and how is our endpoint security compensating control? Yes or no? But that's, again, social engineering is a key area where with just a couple of fairly easy emails, you can have something kind of calculate that response rate. Certainly it happens from within Metasploit, but again, even if you sent out an email on your own and counted how many people came back to you, it's pretty easy stuff to spoof. I think you'll find that the tools between vulnerability management, and again, not just ours, but just in general out there, are becoming more interoperable. You can take a ton of web application stuff, and just dump it into Metasploit now, because we know it's a good place to have that information, even if you're not really doing a lot of pen testing from inside of Metasploit. SIM integration has been a huge topic where vulnerability scanners, they've kind of always hit us up there, but now, again, with a lot more companies having the ArcSights and Q1s and Nitros, because it is much more of a commodity and people have something, they want that Metasploit piece to talk back. They want to factor that in. They want to have the correlation between, again, a vulnerability vulnerability scanner and some pen testing information. And if it doesn't happen directly, because maybe you don't have Metasploit, you don't have Nexpose or Nessus or something like that, they want to see that type of correlation, so I know how big an issue is this. And that's definitely something that, from a company standpoint, we're pushing pretty hard on, not just within the tools, but within our own